In the last 48 hours, the world crossed a threshold that can never be uncrossed. This is not speculation. This is not a theory. This is not another episode of geopolitical tension that diplomats will quietly manage behind closed doors. What Russia has just done is nothing less than the most catastrophic single strategic shift in the history of the modern era. An event so massive, so irreversible, and so devastating that every government on earth is right now in emergency session, desperately searching for answers and finding none that do not lead straight into the abyss. Russia has transferred 1,000 RS-28 Sarmat nuclear missiles to Iran. 1,000. Say that number out loud and let it occupy the full space it deserves. Not a squadron, not a regiment, 1,000 of the most destructive weapons ever manufactured by human civilization, each one carrying a payload capable of erasing a country the size of France from the map. These are not ordinary missiles. Each RS-28 Sarmat, NATO's feared Satan II, travels at hypersonic velocity along trajectories that no defense system on Earth was designed to intercept. With a range of 18,000 kilometers, a capacity of up to 15 independently targetable nuclear warheads, and the ability to approach targets from any direction, including over the South Pole, these weapons render decades of American and Israeli missile defense investments virtually obsolete. Israel issued its response within 6 hours of transfer confirmation, a single statement, just 11 words: Iran has 48 hours to stand down or face total destruction. Washington received the news at 3:14 in the morning. The president was woken immediately. The National Security Council assembled within 20 minutes. For the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the leadership of the world's most powerful nation sat together and could not identify a single option that did not carry the realistic possibility of ending human civilization as we know it. Tonight's analysis takes you deep inside every dimension of this moment. How did Russia execute the largest single nuclear weapons transfer in human history without triggering a Western interdiction response? What does the Sarmat's terrifying technical architecture mean for every defense system that Israel and the United States have spent decades and trillions of dollars building? What is truly behind Israel's 48-hour ultimatum, a genuine red line or the last desperate gesture of a government that has run out of real options? And what does Washington do when deterrence itself has been deterred? Three questions will drive everything that follows. First, how did Moscow pull off this audacious transfer without Western intelligence stopping it? And what does that failure reveal about the actual limits of American global intelligence dominance? Second, what does the RS-28 Sarmat's technical reality mean for Israeli and American defense architecture? Is there any intercept capability on Earth that can realistically engage it at scale? Third, with Israel's 8-hour clock now running and Washington holding no clean military option, is there any path through this crisis that does not end in nuclear exchange? And if there is, who has the courage and the clarity to walk it? There are no comfortable answers tonight. But the truth, however brutal, is the only thing worth saying. The transfer of 1,000 RS-28 Sarmat missiles from Russia to Iran did not happen through shadowy back alley deals or covert smuggling operations that Western intelligence agencies are trained to detect and disrupt. It occurred through something far more audacious and far more difficult to counter: a deliberate state-to-state strategic decision made at the highest levels of the Russian government, executed through official military channels, and completed before Washington could even formulate a meaningful response. To truly understand how this happened, we must first examine the strategic logic that drove Moscow to this extraordinary move. Vladimir Putin does not make decisions of this magnitude impulsively. The transfer of 1,000 nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missiles to a regional power was the culmination of a calculated multi-year strategic process that began years before the first missile crossed the Russian border into Iranian territory. The foundation of that process was a cold realization that crystallized in Moscow over the past 3 years of sustained Western pressure over Ukraine. Every tool of Western coercion had been deployed against Russia simultaneously: unprecedented financial sanctions, sweeping technology, export controls aimed at crippling Russia's defense industry, massive weapons transfers to Ukraine that prolonged the conflict and diplomatic isolation across Western-dominated institutions. Russia's response was patient and methodical. It built alternative financial systems, strengthened energy ties with non-Western partners, expanded the SCO and BRICS into genuine strategic counterweights, and most consequentially identified the single action that would most decisively reshape the global strategic balance in Russia's favor without crossing the threshold into direct military confrontation with NATO. That action was Iran. A nuclear armed Iran, or more precisely, an Iran equipped with the world's most advanced nuclear delivery systems, would permanently consume American strategic attention, tie down U.S. military resources in the Middle East, and severely degrade Washington's credibility as the ultimate guarantor of regional security. Every percentage point of American focus and capacity absorbed by a nuclear capable Iran is a percentage point that cannot be used to pressure Russia elsewhere. Every ally that begins to doubt American security guarantees becomes a potential partner for Moscow. The transfer was therefore never an impulsive escalation. It was a high-stakes strategic investment, perhaps the most consequential single move in Russia's long-term campaign to dismantle American unipolar dominance. Executing the logistics of moving 1,000 massive Sarmat missiles was an enormous challenge, but one that the Russian military logistics apparatus, still the largest and most experienced in the world, was uniquely capable of handling. The operation combined rail transport across Russian territory to the Caspian Sea coast, maritime transfer across the Caspian using Russian military vessels in waters where Western surveillance has limited reach, and final overland delivery through Iranian territory to hardened underground facilities prepared in advance across multiple provinces. The entire movement was masked under the cover of large-scale Russian military exercises in the Southern Military District. Western intelligence satellites observed heavy equipment movements but assessed them as routine exercise activity. By the time analysts fused the data and recognized the discrepancy between declared exercise parameters and actual strategic signatures, the missiles were already safely inside Iranian hardened launch silos, and the transfer was irreversible. This failure was not primarily a collection failure by Western intelligence. Satellites, signals intelligence, and human sources were all in place. The real shortfall was a decision-making failure. Democratic governments require a much higher threshold of certainty before authorizing high-risk actions that could lead to direct confrontation with a nuclear peer. Authoritarian systems do not face the same constraints. Russia acted decisively while Washington deliberated. By the time absolute confirmation arrived, the window for interdiction had already closed. This is the intelligence paradox that authoritarian regimes consistently exploit against open societies. Furthermore, the Iranian reception infrastructure had been meticulously prepared over several years. Hardened underground launch facilities, advanced command and control architecture, and technical teams trained in Sarmat operations were already in place. Iranian and Russian specialists had collaborated in classified facilities long before the first missile arrived. When the convoy finally reached its destination, Iran was ready to integrate the weapons and place them on operational alert within days rather than months. The missiles are now in Iran, the transfer is complete, and the old rules of the international order have just been rewritten in ways that no one in Washington or Tel Aviv is comfortable admitting. This single operation has fundamentally altered the strategic equation in the Middle East and, by extension, the global balance of power. Part 2, Satan 2, the weapon that makes every defense system a relic. The RS-28 Sarmat earned its NATO designation Satan II through a process of sober technical assessment by analysts who do not use dramatic language lightly. This is not marketing hype. It is a precise description of a weapon system that is categorically different from anything that has previously defined the nuclear threat environment. To understand why the Sarmat is in a class of its own, we must examine it across 5 critical dimensions: throw weight, warhead capacity, range, geometry, penetration aids, and the fundamental impossibility of intercept at scale. Begin with throw weight, the raw payload capacity the missile can deliver to its target. The RS-28 Sarmat carries approximately 10 metric tons of deliverable payload. 10 metric tons. That single number changes everything. 10 tons means a single missile can carry not just warheads, but an overwhelming combination of real warheads, sophisticated decoys, electronic jammers, and maneuvering re-entry vehicles designed to saturate and blind any defense system. Simultaneously, this is not a precision strike weapon. This is a strategic sledgehammer capable of delivering multiple independent nuclear strikes in one launch. Next, warhead capacity. The standard operational configuration of the Sarmat carries between 10 and 15 independently targetable reentry vehicles, MIRVs, each capable of being directed to a separate target within a single strike package. Russian doctrine allows flexible yield selection ranging from tactical battlefield strikes to multi-megaton city-destroying warheads. One Sarmat launched against Israel could simultaneously target Tel Aviv, Haifa, Beersheba, the Dimona nuclear complex, Nevatim Air Base command bunkers, and still have warheads left over for secondary military nodes. One missile, one launch. Every strategically significant target in a country the size of New Jersey erased in a single salvo. Now multiply that capability by 1,000 missiles currently sitting in Iranian-hardened facilities. The theoretical maximum delivery capacity reaches 15,000 nuclear warheads, a raw striking power that exceeds the entire deployed American strategic nuclear triad by a factor of 10. The third dimension is range geometry, and this is where the Sarmat's revolutionary character becomes truly apparent. With an operational range of 18,000 kilometers, the missile can reach any point on Earth from any launch site inside Iranian territory. But range alone does not capture the danger. The Sarmat was engineered from the ground up to defeat the specific architecture of American and Allied missile defenses. For decades, the United States, Israel, and NATO built their early warning radars, interceptor batteries, and command systems around one core assumption that Russian or Chinese ICBMs would approach via the shortest polar route over the North Pole. Every dollar spent on THAAD Aegis ground-based mid-course defense in Alaska and California and Israel's Arrow 3 system was optimized for that northern corridor. The Sarmat shatters that assumption. It can fly over the South Pole. It can approach the continental United States or Israel from directions where no early warning radar coverage exists and where no interceptors have been positioned. Against targets in the Middle East, the flight timeline is even more compressed, giving defenders mere minutes instead of the traditional 20 to 30-minute warning window. The entire multi-trillion-dollar missile defense architecture built since the Cold War was never designed to handle this threat profile. The fourth dimension, penetration aids, compounds the problem to an almost comical degree. Alongside its nuclear warheads, every Sarmat carries a full suite of advanced countermeasures, radar decoying objects that perfectly mimic the signature of real warheads, electronic jamming systems that blind radar arrays, and hypersonic maneuvering re-entry vehicles that perform unpredictable lateral maneuvers in the terminal phase at speeds exceeding Mach 20. An intercept system attempting to engage a Sarmat strike package must simultaneously discriminate between genuine warheads and hundreds of decoys, track objects, executing violent evasive maneuvers, and achieve hit-to-kill. Intercepts against targets moving faster than any current interceptor was engineered to engage. The mathematics of such an intercept are not merely unfavorable, they are physically impossible at scale. This leads directly to the fifth and most decisive dimension, the fundamental impossibility of intercept at scale. Against a single Sarmat launch, even the most advanced system might, with perfect conditions and enormous luck, engage a handful of decoys while missing the real warheads. Against a salvo of just 10 Sarmats, the combined package of 150 warheads plus several hundred decoys would completely saturate every theater-level defense. Against the full inventory of 1,000 Sarmats now under Iranian control, the very concept of missile defense ceases to have operational meaning. No system built, no system in advanced development, and no classified program hidden inside the American defense establishment can intercept 1,000 simultaneously launched ICBMs. The physics do not allow it. The sensor timeline does not allow it. The interceptor inventory does not allow it. Israel's Arrow 3 system, its premier exo-atmospheric interceptor, possesses a total deployed inventory that could theoretically engage only a fraction of the warheads from a single Sarmat. Against 1,000 Sarmats, it is not a shield, it is a symbolic gesture. American systems in the region and homeland face the same saturation reality. The Sarmat does not merely challenge missile defense, it renders the entire paradigm obsolete. Iran now possesses a nuclear strike capability that is, for all practical purposes, unlimited in its ability to reach and destroy any target on the planet. Unlike the Cold War balance of terror between two roughly equal superpowers, this new asymmetry has no precedent in stability theory. Mutually assured destruction once created a terrifying but stable equilibrium. What Iran now holds is not mutual, it is overwhelming. The old rules of deterrence, the old assumptions about defense, the old confidence in technological superiority, all of them have just been rewritten by 1000 Russian Satan, two missiles sitting in Iranian silos. And that brings us to the question every leader in Tel Aviv and Washington is now forced to confront when the clock strikes on Israel's 4-8 hour ultimatum. What happens next? 11 words. That is all it took. Iran has 48 hours to stand down or face total destruction. Delivered in the flat, controlled tone of a government that has just stared into the abyss, Israel's ultimatum landed less than 6 hours after confirmation of the Sarmat transfer. It is simultaneously the most understandable and the most strategically problematic response any Israeli leadership has ever been forced to issue. It is understandable because no government on earth can watch 1000 Satan, two missiles roll into hardened Iranian silos pointed at its cities and choose silence. The psychological and political pressure to respond with absolute clarity is overwhelming. For Israel, whose national survival has always rested on the credibility of its red lines and the certainty of overwhelming retaliation, inaction in the face of this threat was never an option. Yet the ultimatum is problematic precisely because it has now locked every player into a compressed timeline where rational deliberation becomes nearly impossible. 48 hours is not a window for negotiation. It is a fuse. What exactly does stand down mean in operational terms? The ambiguity is deliberate and it reveals the impossible position Israel now occupies. Iran cannot physically return 1,000 massive ICBMs to Russia in 48 hours. The logistics, rail transport, maritime reversal across the Caspian, disassembly of warheads verification protocols would require months, even under ideal conditions. So stand down cannot literally mean reversal of the transfer. It means at minimum an immediate verifiable commitment to remove every Sarmat from operational alert status. Warheads decoupled guidance systems, deactivated launch crews, stood down under international inspection. At maximum, it implies full strategic disarmament, something no Iranian government could accept without triggering immediate domestic collapse. Iran understood this perfectly. Its response came not through diplomatic back channels, but through a public statement from the Supreme Leader's office, a deliberate choice of forum that signaled rejection before the first sentence was read. Iran recognizes no ultimatum from any party. Iran's strategic deterrent is a matter of national sovereignty. Any military action against Iranian territory will be met with a response calibrated to eliminate the source of the threat. The 4-8 hour clock is now running in Tel Aviv, in Washington, in Moscow, in Beijing. Every capital with skin in this game understands that when that clock reaches zero, Israel will face a binary choice with no good outcome. Branch 1, Israel acts to achieve even partial degradation of 1,000 Sarmats dispersed across hardened underground facilities built to Russian strategic engineering standards. Israel would need a sustained air campaign measured in hundreds of sorties. Over multiple days, it would require the full inventory of American-supplied GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, the only conventional bunker buster capable of reaching those depths, and explicit real-time authorization from Washington to expend them at scale. Even with perfect intelligence, which Israel does not possess, the survivability of the Iranian force is overwhelmingly favorable. These silos were designed to survive direct hits from American nuclear weapons during the Cold War. Conventional munitions will scratch the surface at best. Any strike that fails to destroy the overwhelming majority of the missiles, the near certain outcome guarantees immediate retaliation. The surviving Sarmats already on alert would launch within minutes. 1,000 missiles, 15,000 warheads. The mathematics of Israeli survival under that barrage simply do not exist. And should Israel, facing existential collapse, escalate to nuclear weapons against Iranian launch sites, it would cross the final threshold that pulls every nuclear power on Earth into emergency protocols simultaneously. Branch 2, Israel does not act. If the clock expires without military follow-through, Israel has publicly demonstrated that its red lines are negotiable under sufficient pressure. The deterrence value of every future Israeli ultimatum, every future threat, every future assertion of the Samson option is permanently degraded. Adversaries across the region and beyond will update their models overnight. The message received will be clear: Israel can be deterred. The ultimate backstop of Israeli security has just been shown to have limits. That perception shift is irreversible. There is no version of this decision that leaves Israel's strategic position intact. The 48-hour ultimatum was never a calculated masterstroke. It was the raw, desperate expression of a government backed into a corner so tight that even the gesture of defiance carries catastrophic costs. Washington's response only deepened Israel's isolation. The official American statement spoke of maximum diplomatic engagement and de-escalation through dialogue. It did not endorse the ultimatum. It did not commit U.S. military assets. It did not threaten Russia with new consequences. It simply asked everyone to talk. In Tel Aviv, that message was read with brutal clarity. America is not coming. Not in 48 hours. Not at the scale this crisis demands. The clock continues to tick. Every passing hour narrows the options further. Every capital on earth now waits to see whether Israel will choose the path of action that risks regional nuclear war or the path of restraint that risks the permanent erosion of its own deterrent credibility. There are no comfortable answers. And that brings us to the final, most painful reckoning: what happens when the world's sole superpower discovers that its own deterrence framework has just been tested and found insufficient. There is a concept in strategic studies known as deterrence failure, the precise moment when the threat of retaliation no longer prevents an adversary from taking actions that the deterring power has declared categorically unacceptable. For 80 years, American strategic doctrine has been built around preventing exactly this outcome. Every weapon system, every alliance commitment, every forward deployment of U.S. military power has served one foundational purpose: to guarantee that the cost of challenging American interests will always exceed any possible benefit. Last night, that guarantee failed, not partially, not in a limited domain, but comprehensively and structurally. Russia transferred 1,000 RS-28 Sarmat nuclear missiles to Iran. This was not a gray zone provocation or a limited arms deal. It was an action that multiple American administrations across multiple diplomatic frameworks and private channels had explicitly declared unacceptable. The red line was clear, repeated, and non-negotiable. Yet Russia crossed it anyway, and the consequences: Washington had long threatened sweeping sanctions, NATO expansion, massive military aid to Ukraine, and financial isolation had already been imposed in their most extreme form. There was nothing left in the deterrent toolkit with additional weight. Russia absorbed the costs and acted anyway. The missiles are now in Iran. The transfer is complete. American deterrence has been publicly tested and found insufficient. The Emergency National Security Council session convened at 3:14 a.m. and lasted 14 grueling hours. Every option presented to the president carried unacceptable consequences. Direct military action against Russia remains off the table. Nuclear powers do not engage in direct war without risking annihilation. Expanding sanctions offers no leverage. Russia has already endured the harshest measures. That leaves striking Iranian missile facilities, but this collides with reality. Destroying 1,000 hardened dispersed ICBMs would require a massive, sustained campaign with no guarantee of success. Even partial failure could trigger immediate retaliation. Surviving missiles would threaten U.S. bases, regional allies, Israel, and potentially the American homeland. The risk of nuclear escalation is not hypothetical, it is inherent. For the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis, Washington faces a situation with no clean option. Every path carries catastrophic risk. The implications extend globally. Adversaries are recalculating the limits of U.S. power. Allies are questioning the reliability of American security guarantees. The non-proliferation framework is fracturing. The taboo against transferring strategic nuclear systems has been broken. This is not just a regional crisis, it signals the end of the post-Cold War order. The unipolar moment has quietly collapsed, not through open conflict, but through a shift in strategic reality. Now the United States faces an agonizing choice: act in risk escalation or accept a transformed global order where its deterrence is weakened. There are no safe answers. The old rules are gone. The world is entering a new phase, uncertain, unstable, and rapidly unfolding.